Hi, Critical Analysis. This is your lecture video for Chapter 6. So Chapter 6 is titled Patterns of Organization. You may hear this also referred to as rhetorical patterns, structures, or the patterns of org. You have a mastery skill with the same name, the patterns of organization. So this connects right with that mastery skill that I talk about in your assignment video for this particular connected chapter. So what's nice about this particular concept is it can be applied for a couple different components of understanding. So first, we've already talked about a little bit of this as it relates to supporting details, because when it comes to supporting details, as I talked about in that lecture video with that associated chapter, there are transition words and signals that are used for an author to allow us to see the relationship between ideas. Now, patterns of organization in general is about being able to identify exactly what it sounds like, the pattern of organization. Authors can organize their writing in multiple different ways. We're going to talk about several of them today. By no means is it like a limited list, but these are the most common ones that we'll talk about today. And the fact that each pattern has its own unique transition word or phrases that are going to help identify what the author is doing with their writing. Okay, so ultimately this will lead to more of an understanding of what you're reading. If you can read something and say, oh, the author is comparing, contrasting, the author is, cause and effect, it just helps you understand what's going on a little bit more. So patterns of organization, what I want you to do is try to, and I'm going to leave it up for about 30 seconds. I want you to do this exercise with me right here on this screen. Go ahead and try to memorize those two columns of numbers for about 30 seconds. Okay, now what I want you to try to do is write down those two columns of numbers. So if you need to pause it real quick and try to write them down, then come back to the video. How did you do? Odds are you might have done okay with this column, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Then when you got to this column, maybe not as easy. There's no clear rhyme or reason on that right-hand column. And so therefore our brain probably had a little bit more of a challenging time to recall that section because there is a clear pattern here. Our minds like patterns. We can pick up like, okay, our phone numbers, our social security numbers, or whatever it might be. With numbers, we like to group and classify and put them into patterns. So when there was not a likely pattern over here, it became a little bit more challenging for most people to remember. Now, the same is said with words, with language. Our brains, if we can identify, oh, this is what is going on in this paragraph, it's easier for us to comprehend the overall message. And so this is what we'll talk about. Every structure that we're going to talk about are going to have something called transition or signal words. And these are the words or phrases that are going to let you know, oh, this author is giving examples, or oh, this author is classifying to let you know what is going on. They might kind of transition into different changes of thoughts or, relationship between ideas. They might add on previous thoughts. And we're going to see all of these examples here throughout the next several slides. These are just some like real quick, like, hey, this is kind of what to expect, the kinds of words. And again, with our supporting details lecture video, I used a lot of these to help us point out where major and minor details were located in the paragraph. All right, so let's start with our very first type of pattern or structure, simple listing. It's just exactly what it sounds like, listing. We do this probably on a daily basis. We have a to-do list, we have a grocery list. So it's just listing items, and there's not necessarily an order. It's just kind of in a list separated by commas, or sometimes by number, but it doesn't always mean something's more important than another. But this is the kind of words if an author was trying to let you know, like, hey, I've got a list going on. They might say things like first, second, next to let you know, like, hey, here's all of these things going on. And they might be listing items, might be listing examples, might be listing reasons, lots of things that we could list. That's one of the first types of structures, listing. An author can just spend their paragraph or a couple sentences in their paragraph listing items. Okay, another structure is definition. So definition is exactly what it sounds like whenever you are trying to define or explain an unfamiliar term, making sure that the author is allowing their reader to know what is happening within the paragraph. And so sometimes they will bold or italicize or underline or what, indicate that there's an unfamiliar word there somehow. And they might say, these keywords, we saw this in the vocabulary chapter, right? Is, means, known as. These are some transition words that an author might use to help like, hey, I am defining this for you. I'm going to spend my time in this section defining this concept or this word. That's the second type of pattern. So we talked about listing, now we talk about definition. An author can also describe. So if they're going to go into detail about what something looks like, sounds like, feels like, tastes like, that kind of thing, they're trying to describe. It's not just a simple list of details. It is really in detail. It is really going into depth with something. So making sure that you are really aware of what something kind of looks like. It's more of that in-depth description. So an author can spend time describing a person, a situation, a location, something of that nature. Then we have, and these are kind of like grouped together, so time, order, sequence, or narration. So whenever someone is using time order, they are also sometimes known as chronological order. Think about your history classes when you're in K through 12, and depending on what classes you're taking now, those classes are mostly organized by time, Revolutionary War to current times, or 1800 to 1900, whatever the case is. You are studying by time in a chronology of events. So time, order, sequence, narration, they're all very similar. So narration is, like telling a story and the order that it occurred. And so an author might use words like first, next, later, last, during, after, or meanwhile to let you know, like, hey, I am telling you how something happened, or I'm telling you in what order something it occurred in. So an author can spend their time giving you time order, and we do this probably on a daily basis. So when you come home and someone says, well, how was your day? Well, first I went to work, then I did this, lastly I did that. We kind of walk them through our day. Then another structure, so we've already gone through several structures now. Another structure is compare contrast. And so a visual example of that, if you know what a Venn diagram is a way to show how things are alike, how they're different, and maybe how they're a little bit of the same, like that intersecting. So comparison means how things are similar. Contrast means how things are different. And so compare contrast could just focus on the comparison part, could just focus on the contrasting part, or like the Venn diagram does a little bit of both. So an author may kind of do mix and match, some comparison against some contrast and some a little bit of both. And so they may use words like however, like, similar, different, yet on the other hand, same, both. You can see these two slides go over comparison and contrast kind of signals to let you know, like, this is what this author is doing. They are spending time going through and giving how something is similar, how something is different, or how maybe they have a little bit of both of those things. So comparison and contrast, those are signal words for that particular structure. Another structure authors might rely on is cause and effect. So A happened and then B happened, or, because this happened, this goes on from there. So for instance, this is a real life example from today. So we have what I call this is going to sound bad, a crap basket. It is on our steps. And what I do is I put things in the basket whenever I know that, like, stuff's downstairs and it actually belongs upstairs. So it's not just all sitting on the stairs, and the kids know, like, okay, check that basket on the way up if there's anything. Well, one of my children, probably my middle, left a toy sit out like in the middle of the stairs, and I was not paying attention. I was bringing laundry down. I walked down the stairs and I stepped on this toy, and I was not very happy. So cause and effect. The cause was my child left a toy on the stair. The effect was Mama was not very happy, and my foot got hurt. So that's a very simple, like, cause-effect relationship, right? Things like that happen every day. Action A causes action B, or you could have action A, B, C results in, result D, or vice versa. Action A causes results B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever the case might be. So it's showing that relationship, and it might have more than one cause, more than one effect. So here are some cause and effect transition words that, an author is giving you cause and effect, or maybe a little bit of both, like because, since, explanation, due to, and then they'll say like as a result or therefore, thus, to let you know that they're showing this cause effect atmosphere between, you know, whatever is going on, these actions, this relationship, whatever that might look like. All right, hopefully you're still with me. Again, all of these are different ways that an author can organize their writing. Their goal is to try to make their reader understand what they're writing on, and so they may do so using different types of organization or structures or patterns. And these signal words allow us as a reader to say, oh, they're using a lot of words that say effect or therefore or cause. They're using cause effect, ultimately leading in greater comprehension. Okay, another type of structure is classification. This is when you have a very large category and you break it down into parts or pieces to let you be able to follow it more easily. So I like to use the example of government, right? Government is a very large topic. Now in school, you're typically not just like, all right, let's learn everything about the government. They're going to break it down. They might break it down like the 3 branches, right? Legislative, executive, judicial. They might break it down with different like state, national, local. The point is they're trying to break it down into groups or categories or kinds or things or branches to let you know like, hey, here's all of these parts and how they work together to look at this overarching larger topic. So that's what classification does and the purpose of that. Then we have summary, which I would say a lot of people are probably familiar with this. You know, it's toward the end of a piece of writing, or it could just be the end of a paragraph, like the last sentence. It's really when you're trying to kind of condense all of your main points into one concise place. And you might say things like to summarize or in summary or in conclusion to let your reader know like, hey, I'm trying to wrap this up. Then you also have what's called location or spatial order to show where things are located. So you might see things like over, under, above, below, between, north, south, left, right, to let you know like, hey, I'm trying to show you where, it answers that question, where is something located. You also have generalization and examples. So maybe you're trying to explain something, but it's not coming out quite right, so you want to give an example. So you may say things like, for example, such as, to exemplify, to let your reader know, hey, this is what's going on. Okay, so again, these are different structural patterns, rhetorical patterns, however you want to phrase it, that the author is using to let their reader know, hey, this is what's happening in my paragraph. I'm going to spend this time defining, or I'm going to spend this time classifying. And I'm going to use these words to let you know because it really does help you understand the meaning more. Something I would do with you if you were in my face-to-face class is I would have you create what's called a graphic organizer, where I would have you put like in the middle a web or some kind of visual representation, where I would have you put the title as, you know, patterns of organization, and then branch off, and each pattern gets its own little circle, and then kind of define it and give some example signal words from there. Because sometimes putting all of this information into a visual format can be helpful to really start sorting through, because as I've gone over this chapter with many classes, it's not a very difficult chapter. There's just a lot of details. It's just really starting to kind of understand like, oh, when an author says something like between or inside or outside, they're using spatial order. Or when an author is using words like types and categories, they're classifying. It's just really getting familiar with those types of words and what they identify. Now, you can also find that sometimes an author may not be limited to just one type of structure. So maybe in a longer piece of writing, they're going to have examples and listing and cause and effect. Like it's all going on at one time. And so that's again where really looking to see what signal words and what are they doing in the paragraph or the paragraphs to help me as a reader understand this message. Okay, so that is chapter 6, organizational patterns. So I encourage you to, you know, go into your week 5, into your optional folder, and there are lots of there's actually just one pattern. Here we go. Practice. If you want to fill it out and send it to me and I can give you some feedback, see how it's going, I will be happy to do so. This one's fairly quick. There's only 10. You have a word bank and you just kind of match them up. And it might be helpful to just kind of test to see how it's being used. Like I'm going to do the first one with you anyway. Parents tend to treat the oldest child differently from his or her siblings. Unless the siblings are twins, then they tend to be treated quite similarly. So for me, if I'm getting familiarized with signal words, I see different and similar. And to me, that is clearly identifying that they are using compare contrast. They are going to be talking about how things are similar and how they are different in regard, in this case, to siblings. So that's what I mean by looking at this. Look to see what kind of signal words or transitional type words or phrases are being used, and what does that identify? Which structure goes with that? So if you want to complete the rest of that and test yourself and send it to me, I can give you feedback and see how that goes. All right, if you have any other questions or want more practice on this concept or just want a little bit more detail, I'm always welcome, open to a Zoom or an email conversation, whatever you need. And I hope you're doing well this week, and I'll see you next time.